Hey y'all, it's me, Kevvie. These books were fucking shit. Let's talk about why. I have two honorable mentions on this list. Books that I loved, yet deserve a spot down here. The first is Manhunt by Gretchen Felker-Martin. If y'all remember my video about this book, I loved so much the trans representation in here. It truly made me feel seen. But at the same time, watching characters that you deeply resonate with go through 400 pages of extremely traumatic shit is painful as fuck. I loved this book, but it also really hurt me. And I had to stop and decompress so often, sometimes even every other page. It was intense, probably too much for me, but great work, and keep it up. My other honorable mention is Life After Death by Sister Souljah. This was by far the most surprising book that I read last year. It is almost universally hated, and with good reason. It equates getting fucked in the ass to bestiality, and then says that only the souls of your aborted fetuses can save you from going to hell. For the first 300 pages or so, I absolutely hated this book. But then, in the final stretch, I wound up loving it so much. In her final step in purgatory, Winter is forced to admit to every terrible thing she has ever done. And if she tries to deny it, they have video evidence to prove it. Taking this woman who has never been accountable for her life full of heinous actions and finally making her face them and seeing how she would react in that situation, oh, it was incredible. Completely turned the book around for me. It would unquestionably be among my top books of the year if the bulk of it weren't so miserable to read. My first read of 2022 was also one of my worst reads, and that was Whose Body by Dorothy L. Sayers. This was a terrible ass mystery, because there was really only ever one suspect, and there wasn't any twist, just, oh yeah, he did it, just like we thought the whole fucking time. That isn't the only Dorothy L. Sayers on this list, though. The other being Murder Must Advertise. This time there were a whole lot of clues that went in a whole bunch of different directions, but then the majority of them wound up being not just red herrings, but entirely irrelevant. And again, the most likely suspect wound up being the one that did it. I also just fucking hate the way this bitch writes. Reading this book was a miserable time, and I will never read her again. Despite her being my favorite mystery author, Mary Roberts Rinehart has two books on this list. The first is The Breaking Point. We read this for a readathon. I think it was the group read for March Mystery Madness. But unfortunately, whoever chose it didn't do their due diligence. See, for many years, Rinehart was forbidden from writing mysteries by her husband. So books from that era dip into other genres, either romance, comedy, or gothic suspense. This one was a gothic suspense, which when you sign up for a mystery is just really disappointing. The other Rinehart on the list was The Red Lamp. While being a true mystery, this book's problem was its format. It's told through journal entries, which I normally don't mind, but the journal entries span every single day for 4 months. This book moved incredibly slowly because I had so many days to fill with whatever. The epistolary format also prevented her from utilizing her usual wonderful writing style, so it didn't really read like her. Eventually, I was so over it I tried switching to an audiobook, but the only audiobook available was an amateur LibriVox recording that was just painful to listen to. I played it at triple speed just so I could get it over with, missed when they revealed who done it, and didn't even bother rewinding. The Guest List by Lucy Foley was advertised as being like a modern Agatha Christie, but I don't recall Christie writing smut. I can get down with the occasional piece of erotica, but these dumbass characters made sex their entire personality, and I just could not bother to continue reading that. Years ago, I tried reading the Communist Manifesto and was so bored I gave it up almost immediately. This year I decided to give it another shot, this time as an audiobook. I figured even if it sucks, it's only an hour. But it's an hour I'll never get back. A miserable, tortuous hour. Love Makamis, but damn did that book suck. In 2022, I read a lot more trans authors than ever before. I loved most of them, but there were also a few I really didn't get along with. For starters, Dtransition Baby. Not only was this book incredibly triggering, but I felt like when the real motivation is given for the character detransitioning, it sends a terrible message to trans readers, suggesting that if they're going to be clockable or ugly or whatever, that they might as well just stay dudes. I feel like that's a really harmful message to include in the most successful trans novel ever, and that really ruined the book for me. This Is How It Always is another trans story, and my aunt really loved it, so I was looking forward to it. Realized quickly that this book wasn't written by a trans person, but by the mother of a trans person. This means that many of the trans issues are handled so inappropriately. I can forgive a book for hurting me if it's a trans author sharing my pain, but when it's a cis shit profiting off my pain, absolutely the fuck not. Fuck Laurie Frankel and this stupid ass book. The uncontested, absolute worst book I read in 2022 was 120 Days of Sodom. I wanted to participate in Garb August, but in only a minimal capacity, so I figured I could just read one really trashy book and be done with it. What a horrible mistake I made. This book fucked me up so bad I was in a reading slump for 2 months after. It's disgusting, it's depraved, it has no literary value. It's just a pervert getting his rocks off by writing down his darkest sexual fantasies. I'm not one for book banning, and I'm not saying we should ban this, but I am saying it should never have been published to begin with. Plenty of authors struggle to get their manuscripts seen, let alone published. Yet this prick can describe molesting and murdering dozens of children, and it's a classic? Nah, fuck that gross ass bullshit. I am so glad this fucker's dead. So there you have all the worst fucking shit I read last year. 2022 was a fucking struggle, and so far 2023 has been too. Hopefully the year will turn around soon. What were your worst reads last year? Think you have anything that can top these? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you all so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and if it pleases and sparkles, I'll see you in the next video. Mwah!